Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Dr. Kivette Parkes, who is a licensed naturopathic physician. Welcome to the show, Ms. Parkes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Dr. Parkes is in the building. It's an honor to have a doctor on, and also a doctor from the Caribbean, with that Caribbean culture. And I want to know so much about the culture. I know that you're from Jamaica, but I want the listeners to know about your upbringing and obviously where you are right now. But if you could just kind of give the listeners a little bit of understanding of your background, where you're from.
Well, as you said, I'm from Jamaica. I was born and raised there, and I lived there until I was almost 18. And so a lot of my upbringing and growing up was in Jamaica. I was kind of in the East rural part of Jamaica. So we're off to Kingston, but we're a little outside of it. So I had a pretty, I would say, pretty awesome childhood and a pretty very full experience growing up and being in Jamaica and really fully immersed in the culture and everything that it has to offer.
Now, when growing up, how was did you know that you were going to be a doctor? Was that something that you thought about?
So you know what? I'm going to say yes, but the only reason I'm saying yes, and it's a really funny story. When I went to high school pretty young. So I was about 10 years old when I started high school. And on the first day of school, there is an orientation for the whole class. So everybody in the same class, they're in there with all their parents. And so the kids were seated and the parents were kind of scattered around the classroom, but mostly in the back. And so the teacher was going around to every person, every child, and asking them to introduce themselves and say something about, what they want to be when they grow up. At this point, I had absolutely no idea how to answer that question. I was 10 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to be. But, I learned really quickly. So kids got up and they said their name and they said what they wanted to be. And this one girl got up and she said her name and she said she wanted to be a doctor. And then all the parents applauded. So I figured, you know what, that must be the right answer. So that's what I'm going to say. And, honestly, every time somebody asked me what I wanted to be after that, I just kept saying it and with no real intention behind it, to be honest. And as I got older, like in high school, I started picking all the science subjects because when my teacher asked me, what do you want to be? I would say the same thing. So they're like, well, you need to do the science subjects. When I went to college, I did all the science subjects and here I am.
Now, when growing up in Jamaica, was that could you express a little bit more about the culture of how it was growing up in Jamaica for you?
There's two sides to the Jamaican culture. The first side of it was growing up in a community. And in a community where you know all your neighbors, you go to school, you go to church, you do everything with kind of the same group of people. That to me was really, really important. And in that kind of community, it's almost like everybody is your parent. Like everybody who's older than you is your parent. So you can't go out and misbehave because if, your neighbor sees you or somebody else in the neighborhood sees you, then they'll treat you like you're their child and you will get punished. You'll get reprimanded. So it was a really interesting way to grow up. And I really appreciate that. The flip side of it is I grew up in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. And that was a really big time in Jamaica of political turmoil and a lot of violence. So I did grow up in a community that was pretty much plagued by that as well. So there was, the politics and the gang violence and all that stuff going on around while I was growing up. And now looking back, I can kind of see it for what it was and really appreciate it. But as a child, I don't really think I understood, really what that was about. But that was definitely a part of the picture.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you feel like that was going to affect you when you were growing up in your profession, like making those choices with education and pursuing it, becoming a doctor, like growing up in Jamaica?
I think it did help me figure out that I wanted something different than a lot of what I saw around me. I didn't know any doctors when I was growing up, except the doctor I went to when I was sick. But outside of that, I didn't know anybody who done anything like that. Nobody in my family, none of my friends or their family members, and so it was. As I said, it just started out as something that I would say over and over until it became something that was real. Like at some point in my life, I guess I realized there was no other option but to do this because that's what I'd always said.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's wow. Now you've transitioned from Jamaica. You said like around 18. You said.
Yes.
So you transitioned to the U.S. right at 18. Like, what was the big culture shock for you at that point in time?
Oh wow, everything was a culture shock. So coming from East Rural Jamaica to the U.S., and going to a city and getting on a train the first time, seeing snow for the first time in my life, being around people of different cultures and different ethnicities that I had never been exposed to, up until that point. It was pretty shocking.
I mean, hey, look. First off, the weather alone will get you.
Oh my!
The weather alone, you out here bundling up. Yeah, when you back in Jamaica is a whole different. And then obviously the food and stuff like that. Did you feel like you found like a cohort of like Caribbean people when you moved to the U.S.? Did you feel like you found like a niche, a group of people that had that Caribbean culture that was still true to that?
Absolutely, yes. I did find, lots of different Caribbean people that I, became friends with, hung around, I was able to more identify with them, as I guess I struggled to really assimilate into the American culture,
Mm-hmm.
at that young age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, when you got obviously when you transitioned out to the U.S., obviously you were doing the educational stuff back home, but then when you got to the U.S., you got significant amount of degrees and an intense educational background, from bachelor's degree in biology, minor in chemistry, mathematics, master's degree, in so much. And then obviously where you are right now, like, how did you navigate through all this education as a Black woman?
Ah, um, that's a tough question, but it I always thought I didn't have the option of not doing it or not doing well. Like I didn't have that I didn't have a backup plan, and I don't come from a family where my parents would have just like taken care of me or taken me in if I didn't like do something. So I always felt like I had to. I'm also the oldest child in my family, so I always felt like I had to, take all the steps and do all the things just to make sure that my younger siblings had somebody to lean on and somebody to look up to, but also that I was taking a lot of the burden off of my parents. So I always was looking for the next thing to do or the next step to take. So that was probably the driving force behind me with education. I also place a very large value on education because I think I learned really early on that it is a key that can open a lot of different doors. And
Got
so
it.
I took advantage of that. And as a Black woman, again, there is this unspoken pressure, I would say it is, or not even the pressure, but an expectation that we do need to do more and be more and have more and know more.
And I'm glad that you mentioned about like education is a key, right? That can unlock a lot of doors. Here at the Zaka platform and with our community, that a lot of the guests that have come on the show have expressed um, the importance of an education and how education cannot be taken away from you, but it could open up those doors. There's a lot of things like privileges and things, or knowing your worth, educating yourself financially, educating yourself about the community, the businesses that you're going to be working for, educating yourself about corporate America or even the industry that people are going to look into be in. Education is very big, and I could see from your resume and from your bio how you really like jumped into it and like really got up into that whole thing. And I know that getting your doctrines obviously is a very hard thing. And how long did it take you to get that?
Um, Long time.
Long time, that's right. Long time. Like just the thought of that, knowing that it's never over, you're still practicing and still going back to school for that. Like, what was like one of the first things you did after you got your doctrines? That's a big accomplishment.
After once I finished like my final degree, I took a break. Like I think I slept for like 2 weeks. Like once I finished
Little sleeping beauty right here.
I took a huge break. I think the whole summer off. I did whatever I wanted to do. I ate a lot. I slept a lot. I was done.
Mm-hmm. And rightfully so. You should. I think that's a massive accomplishment. Does anyone in your family have the doctrines besides yourself?
No, I'm the only one that I know of right now. I'm working on one of my little sisters to get a doctorate in pharmacy. So she's in Jamaica still, and she's at the University of the West Indies
Mm-hmm.
there, and she's in her third year. So she's gonna be our second one.
Oh, well, congratulations on being the first and for setting the example and raising the bar when it comes to education in your family.
Yeah.
When did you open up your practice? And what was the inspiration behind it?
I opened up my practice I would say about a half a year into practicing. I first joined another practice, somebody else's practice, and I quickly, almost immediately realized that it was not for me. I had no intention of opening up my own practice initially. But after working for someone within the first few months, I knew that I had to do things my own way because I have a different set of beliefs and standards, and obviously not everybody is going to be in line with that. And so I realized that I had to do things my own way, and that's why I decided to open up my practice.
Mm. And what were like some of the fears or thoughts that were going through your head at that point in time? Because that's another big thing, just opening your own practice. Like now you're like, I got my doctrines. I could work for somebody else, but I want to work for myself. And I think that's something that, a lot of the guests did talk about that are entrepreneurs in a sense, or open up their own business or practices. Like, what was that feeling inside?
Well, my first feeling was fear. It's like, well, what's going to happen if this doesn't work? You don't know anything about running a practice. You barely just got out of school. What if this doesn't work? What's going to happen? Like, what are you going to do? So it was a lot of questioning whether or not it was going to work, to be honest. I knew I wanted to do it, but it was a lot of unknown. And so, like, where am I going to get all the money from to actually start this practice? Where am I going to, how am I going to do it? And, I'm a really resourceful person, I think. So once I made up my mind that this is what I was going to do, and I had to do it, I literally had no choice. I figured it out. I called a few friends. I talked to them about it. And I started really, really slowly and really small. And I think that was the key. The thing about medical school is you learn all about health and medicine and all this stuff. Nobody teaches you about business. So business is completely different from anything I had ever done. And so I think one of the things that helped me was that, I had a big vision and a big dream, but I didn't try to accomplish the whole dream in like one step. I started really, really small. I had a small space that I was renting out of, a bigger office. a few patients, and I grew very slowly from there.
And I can only imagine like the struggle of growing slow, like your question as you go through that process. You're like, how long is this going to take? It took me forever to get my doctrines, and now the patients are coming in slower, the clients are coming in slower. I got to spend money, marketing, the whole nine. I mean, it's a lot of things that go in there. You know, what I was going to ask you, like, what are some of the struggles that you face as a doctor that most people wouldn't even know?
Going back to like the early days, that's kind of when it was a lot of growing pains and a lot of learning that came from that. Um, as a doctor, I do pretty well now, but when I first started out, I had zero money, and I had no family money or friends to give me money, or I couldn't get any loans. I'd just come out of school. I had nothing. I literally had nothing. I remember one day going to the gas station, and this will always stick in my mind. I put $3.50 in my gas tank. Now this was a long time ago, and $3.50 was probably more gas than you could get today, but it wasn't a lot of gas. Like I
Mhm.
literally put enough gas in my car to see if I could like make it to work and make it back home. And the struggle was really real. So a lot of the early struggles were definitely like financial, like if I'm going to be really honest. And what I want people to realize that it doesn't take a lot of money if you are really like, if you this with integrity and you are really doing things for the right reason, because people, I can't even tell you how my practice grew, but my practice grew, a lot faster than it probably should have grown. And I think the reason behind it is because of the way I treat people and the way I take care of people. Like, people just kept
Mhm.
referring a lot of people to me, and to this day, I'm so grateful for it.
That's a key thing. I like the word of like being kind,
Hmm.
being open and honest, and just leading with a heart,
Right.
and being true to the patients, the clients that are coming in, and finding out what their needs are versus putting your needs first. And it's a very hard thing to do, especially when you own your own business, because sometimes you got to think about yourself. But it seems that, from listening to your story and reading from your bio and stuff, is that you definitely put those people first, and that's why you're so successful in where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know nutrition is very important to you. Can you tell me a little bit more why nutrition is important to you, and like what's the best advice you could give to somebody like that's working on their diet?
Okay, so my practice is a nutrition based practice. And the reason for that is I firmly believe that your food is the core of your health. And so if we look at some statistics, according to the National Institutes of, about 70% of the people who die each year, especially here in America, die from lifestyle related causes. And my practice is called the Lifestyle Clinic because there are 30% of things that we can't do anything about. They're like random genetic abnormalities. They're like freak accidents, car accidents, like a lot of other things can cause death, right? But to know that there are about 70% of things that are lifestyle related, like, that's huge. And so while I'm not going to worry about the 30% of things that we have no control over, I felt like my biggest influence should be in an area that we can actually change. We can change our lifestyles, and the nutrition is a big part of our lifestyles. So what you put in your body, you are what you eat. Like, there's never been a truer statement. Like, what you put in your body actually becomes the building block and the raw materials cells. Now, all our cells turn over. No cell lives forever.
Hmm.
All we change our cells. We change our skin cells, our eyes, or or organs. Everything has like its own little life cycle. So everything you're putting into your body, you have to literally think of it as a building block or raw material for the new body that you're going to have once all your current cells change. And so
Mm.
if we have the key to that, like if the key to that is putting food in our mouth, then understanding nutrition, understanding how food works, I think should be at the core of every health plan. like everybody who's going to try to help somebody be healthier, I do believe that nutrition is, that's the non-negotiable. It has to be the core of everything. And to answer the rest of your question, the best advice I can give somebody is to stick to nature. It's so funny. It was my birthday recently and I went to try to get a birthday cake. And, you go to these bakeries and places and they have like the labels. You don't want to read the labels because they put all sorts of stuff in that cake. But what I thought was interesting was on the bottom, it actually said made with bioengineered food products.
Ooh.
And I was like, well, what is like, I thought cake was supposed to be like eggs and flour and butter and sugar. But no, not anymore. And so the thing that I want to impress on people is that you need to stick to food that comes from nature as close to their natural form as possible, because the problem with nutrition is the bioengineering of, like, we're making food. We're not growing food anymore. The things are being synthesized in a lab to resemble what is in nature. And we don't know that. If I hadn't seen that thing on the label, I would have never known that they have ingredients in the food that are not like real. Like when I see egg, I think I just assume it's a real egg, but not necessarily anymore, because we've come so far with technology that we're making food. The problem with that is everybody's body is different, and a lot of these special chemically enhanced foods are causing a tremendous amount of health issues, but there's no connection. Like, you're never going to go to your doctor and say, oh my God, I have pressure, or I have this diabetes, or I have whatever I have this pain that I can't get rid of, or this digestive issue. And they say, oh, you know what? Let's look at your food. No, the first thing they're going to do is say, okay, well, let's put you on this medicine. The food is completely ignored.
I like how you put that in regards to stay close to the source as possible. I think that you're right. When you're reading on those labels, sometimes you might not know those words, but if they got 20 words, that means it's far away from where it originally came from.
Absolutely. That's a really good way of looking.
Yeah, because every now and then I'm in the store, but the fact that you try to get yourself a little ice cream cake and it came out like that, woo! Like, what's the world coming to right now? Right. Dr. Parkes, we got to worry about the ice cream cake that we get from the store.
Right.
Oh man, just take us back to Jamaica, where you could just eat mangoes right off the tree.
Where you can pick your food and eat it. And that's what if you're in an area, if your climate allows it, if your space allows it, if you can grow anything, just try to grow it. Because again, even when we're at a place now where, like, we go to the grocery store. One of my friends came here from Jamaica to visit me a while back, long time ago. And I remember, she came over, she was going to stay with me. And I'm like, well, I have no idea what she's going to want to eat. So when she got here, I'm like, well, let's just go to the grocery store and you can pick out the things that you like. And, I'll make sure, we have those in the house. She stood when we walked in the grocery store, she just stood and like, she was just looking at everything. Like, and I'm like, oh, what, are you okay? She's like, she's like, it looks fake. She's like, every tomato is like the perfect color, perfectly round. Like, all the vegetables look uniform. They're the same. And me, I have been in America for a while. So like, to me, it just looks like what your grocery store looks like. But the truth is, that's not natural. Nature doesn't make identical clones of everything is a little bit different. But when we are mass producing things and using all these chemicals and fertilizers, we can choose and kind of make things, look more appealing. And so even our regular fruits and vegetables, sometimes we have to be careful because, and look at where they came from.
True. It's very important that, as you get older as well, too, that people pay close attention to those things. Now, with your practice, could you talk a little bit more about what you do as a naturopathic physician?
Absolutely. So a naturopathic physician is pretty much a primary care doctor who only does holistic and alternative modes of treatment. So I really try to avoid any kind of medications. I don't prescribe medications in my practice. So there are no drugs. In some states, in some places, the naturopathic doctors do prescribe medication if it's absolutely necessary. But in my practice and the way I practice, we don't do any drugs. And most of the people come to me because they're on drugs and they want to get off, and they want to get better so they can get off. So it's really a holistic way of doing things. So what I like to say to people is, say 10 people come in and they all have headaches. Like if you go to a regular doctor and you have 10 people going in and they're like, oh, doc, I have headaches and they keep coming and they bother me. That doctor is probably just going to write a prescription for pain medicine. So here, you take this pill whenever you get a headache, it will fix it. All 10 people will walk out of that office with the same prescription. As a naturopathic doctor, my approach is the opposite. My approach is to ask questions. And so I know if 10 people have a headache, there may be a different reason for each one of them having a headache. For somebody, it might be dehydration. For somebody else, it might be an allergy. For somebody else, their blood pressure may be too high. For somebody else, it may be their hormones. So my job is to figure out what's causing the problem and then find a solution to remove the cause. And when we remove the cause, the symptoms get better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how naturopathic doctors work. We don't do drugs, and we really try to address the cause of issues as opposed to just treating symptoms.
Mm-hmm. That's a very deep way of putting it, where now I could see where the main difference is, and mainly as a doctor, I know you deal with so many patients, and they have different personalities. How do you build trust with your patients?
So, I always say people are really smart. People are smart. And, I actually respect each individual that comes into my practice because they all bring something different. They're, as I said, different personalities, different background. It's almost like dealing with your family or your friends. Everybody has a different personality, and you have to figure out how to navigate that. And the way I approach it, and the way, it has worked out with me and my patients, is that I treat them as if they were me, or if they were my mom or my dad or my sister or my brother or my friend. I really treat if it's something that I wouldn't do for myself personally, I'm not going to recommend that they do that. Or if I wouldn't want my mom to do it, I wouldn't recommend that one of my patients do it. So they know that when they're dealing with me, a lot of the things that they're doing, I'm also doing. And if I'm recommending something for them to do, it's because it's something that I've either done myself, or if I were in their position, I would do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm.
So that's the level of trust, especially at, a lot of my patients have been with me for probably a decade now or more. The way I have long-term relationships with people, and, obviously the time builds trust, but them knowing that I always have their best interest at heart is really, I think, the core of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, what are some of the advantages that you bring to the medical field right now as as an immigrant woman, or even a Black woman?
I think I bring a different level of understanding, as first of all, as a woman, and then as a woman from, with a different background, from a different culture. I really do think I bring that level of understanding. Also fuels a lot of empathy. I literally feel and can understand where a lot of my patients are coming from, because I've been there. I've been there, and I love when I get somebody from, either Caribbean or African or some sort of ethnic background, and I talk about food a lot. And it's really nice for them, I think. Sometimes they mention some sort of food that they're used to eating that's, really common in their culture. And I can go, oh yeah, I like that. I've had that before, blah. How do you make yours? It's really nice to be able to identify, with those kind of core things in people, because it makes the conversation a lot easier. And then it builds the trust. People tell me so many things and they go, oh my God, I would never tell this to my other doctor, but I feel like I can tell you all this.
That's the relationship you got with your patients. That's good. That's good. The fact that they trust you and they feel like you have provided them with a safe space, which is very important when you're sharing like your health. I know sometimes it's a very personal thing. Some people are not as open to sharing like, what's really bothering them. So the fact that they are that open and they feel that safe within your buildings, your walls, that's an honor.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, it's a scary place to be, sometimes it could
It is.
be, right?
It is, but I feel like I've been to all sorts of places with people. I've been with people in their good times, the times ever, and I've been with them in, their absolute darkest hour. And because of that, I really feel like I can relate. And it's not just me observing. I'm in there with them. I'm experiencing with them. And, it's a privilege.
Mm-hmm. True, true, true. Now I know you have a lot of great accomplishments. When we're talking about a lot of them right now, but I know you wrote a book as well. Like, how did you manage to write a book and the mission behind it?
Yeah, I've written a couple of books, but yes, so again, and I think the next level of my career will be more reflective of this. Again, I believe that education is power. So the reason I wrote a book was because I wanted people to know, understand more. There's only so much I can say when I'm in front of somebody talking to them, but I feel like writing it down and putting it out there, somebody who doesn't necessarily know me or have the opportunity to work with me, they may be able to grab a book and pick some things out of it that
True,
help
true.
enhance their lives. So that's why I did it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, writing things down is always essential. It helps you remember the things that you did. But also you could share it with someone. Sometimes, like you said, some people might be more open to conversation and hearing stuff, but a lot of times people want to read. So you're providing another outlet for someone to kind of like understand your journey and some of the things that could help them with along their journey.
Absolutely.
Now, throughout your career, I know that you obviously have had a significant amount of victories, but I know there's those low parts, right? Those low moments where you felt like you were down, you didn't know if you could get back up. But like, could you express or share with us like one of the lowest moments you had, and how did you overcome that obstacle?
Hmm. Well, I've had a few low moments. Um, One of the lowest moments I've had, and this is with full transparency, I have an issue with. I just did a blog post about this because it was my birthday, so I'm all reflecting about this new year of life. Um, my biggest struggle to this day in practice is losing people. So it's inevitable. People will die. But I did experience, one patient passing away. And she had a lot of issues and stuff before I even met her. But I experienced one issue where that happened, and I I didn't think that I could come back from that. Like she was really dear, really sweet woman, and she had a couple of babies, and I know the whole family, because literally the whole family is everybody's my patient. The mother, the dad, the grandfather, the everybody, like the kids, the husband, aunts, uncles. So like being so involved in their whole family dynamic and then having that loss, I actually, it took me a long time. It took me probably over a year to really kind of feel normal again after that. That was devastating, for me and for the whole family. But
Mm-hmm.
losing people, I still struggle with that. And my whole point of being in practice is to not lose people. So my I always say health is a lifestyle, and my job is to help everybody celebrate as many birthdays as possible. That's my core mission in life. I'm very clear about that. And so I still find it very, very hard to overcome that when it happens, and it doesn't get easier.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've just grown a lot over the years, and I'm to deal better.
You got to develop like some type of thick skin for that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, and I mean, you're talking about a life loss, and then obviously you got to express it to the family members, and there's it doesn't go away that easy.
No,
Like
it
the
doesn't.
presence of the individual is still felt. The relationship that you have with the patient. If you were working with them over a grace period of weeks, months, years. So I can only imagine how hard it is to kind of like let it pass and then like continue on. But you definitely have some thick skin, and more importantly, I think you definitely are leading with your heart. That look, they're in a better place, and
Yeah.
you got to keep on helping, and you're always going back to work, always thinking like, okay, the next person let me keep. But I like how you said, my job is to keep people alive, and is keeping long, healthy lives. And I feel like you're doing a wonderful job with your practice and the information that you're sharing with them within your books.
Thank you.
Now, could you tell us a story of how you helped a patient that made you realize that you chose the right path?
Oh Lord.
I know they could be a young adult, kid, adult, whatever, but someone that just made you say, you know what, this is why I do what I do.
Okay, yeah, I have a really cool story. So I have, lots of patients. I've helped so many, like hundreds of people over the years. But there was one guy who stands out to me, and because he was such a fun guy, older gentleman. I think he was probably he was close to retirement when I met him. So he was back then he was probably in mid 60s. And he came to me because he was in pretty bad shape. He had worked with one of the airlines for many years, really high powered position, very, very busy person, spent his whole just being really, really busy. Did a lot of great things. But at this point in his life, he was getting ready to retire, and he had problems. He had heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes. He was overweight. He was tired all the time. He was in pain. This man he just run his body down, And part of what I teach is for people not to do that to their bodies, because it will catch up with you. So he came to me right at that point, and he's like, well, my wife and I think it was like it was a big wedding anniversary. I don't remember how many years, but he really wanted to go to the Grand with his wife because that was her dream. And I didn't know, I'd never done this, but apparently there are donkeys that like take you down the Grand Canyon. There was some donkeys involved. The only reason he came to me was that he was over the weight limit to get on the donkey. That was his dream.
Wow.
Right down on the donkey with his wife. And so, and he came to me well in advance of them actually. He didn't even think he could ever book the trip because they wouldn't allow him to get on a donkey. And his health wouldn't allow him to. He just had so many problems. So we worked together over several months, probably close to a year. And he got off his blood pressure medicines, his blood sugar normalized, so he wasn't diabetic anymore. He wasn't in any kind of pain, didn't have any problems. He was like, he told me he felt like he was 20 years old. And I'm like, well, don't go acting like you're 20 because you're not. But one of my happiest moments in practice was when he sent me a picture of him on a donkey. And I just felt like it was like the best gift I could have ever gotten. It was so satisfying to see him accomplishing this dream.
Wow. She said, right to your email. Right. You're like, he's probably looking for some information, some nutrition. He wants to come back in for a visit, and then boom, the picture downloads and it's him on a donkey.
Him on a donkey. I was so proud of him.
Well, congratulations, and thank you for sharing that story. And it's something I want to kind of leave you with. A question is, as a Black woman, a doctor as well, you're a role model for a lot of upcoming generations, right? The new generation coming up. What is like the best advice you could give to them if they're passionate about the medical field?
Okay, so the medical field is very broad. There are many different ways you can go. Lots of different career paths. I chose a path less like doing natural medicine is very different from what most people do with the conventional medicine. My honest advice is to be true to yourself. Like, realize that whatever your career choice is, first of all, you can change it whenever you want. You're not a tree, you're not planted, you're not stuck anywhere. You can always change your mind, but make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, you're in integrity with yourself. And what that means is, if your heart's going one way, but then, practical reasons or life circumstances are pulling you another way, you're never truly going to be happy, because you're going against yourself, like what your core beliefs are, what your heart is telling you to do. So follow your heart. And a lot of people used to say that to me, and I'm like, what does it mean, follow your heart? So weird. But the older I got, the more I realized that it really, you have to be honest and be in integrity with yourself. Otherwise, you will not be happy. And if it's a career, you're going to do it every day, and if you are not happy doing it, that's not a good situation. So do the thing that makes your heart smile.
Mm-hmm. That's the journey that everybody's on right now in the world of today. That is probably like the biggest thing that anybody could share with anybody is just the fact that find something that you're passionate about and stick to it. A lot of people in this world today are very miserable or unhappy with the lifestyle that they have, but it comes down to them making the choices. Finding the right people, getting inspired, finding the right individuals to kind of get them on the right path. Someone like yourself. And kind of just being committed and sticking to it, because life is too short. And I know you being in the field that you're in, you see it all the time. Life is too short. People are passing away at a very young age. So it's like, while you're here, let's make the best of it. Let's push, let's grow, let's get like someone like yourself, education, you didn't just get one degree, you got a few. You didn't write one book, you wrote a few.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You didn't just work at a practice after you graduated, you open your own. Like, you always want a better version of yourself. And I think that's something that I'm gravitating to and taking away from this conversation. And I know the listeners too, like the amount of effort and work you put on yourself. And I say all this to say that you've made the biggest investment, and the biggest investment is to yourself. And it's an honor to have had you on the show to kind of share that information with our listeners, and your story from just growing up in Jamaica in a rural area to where you are now, owning your own practice and helping out so many people. Something I wanted to know, do you ever feel like you're going to go back home to Jamaica and open up a practice out there?
No.
She cut that down real quick.
No, because I'm at a different place now. I'm not trying to open another practice, and my practice is virtual, so people now can work with me no matter where they're located.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I'm definitely planning on going back to Jamaica, but not to practice.
She's like, now I'm gonna be right on the beach with my mango, with some breadfruit, ackee and saltfish.
Absolutely.
You've done big things. Well, Miss Dr. Parkes, I just want to say thank you again for just being on the show and sharing all this information. And to the listeners, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Dr. Parkes, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect, and follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcasts.